Let's talk a little bit about 2D and 3D shapes. You've probably been learning about shapes since you were little, so you know a lot about some of the basic shapes. We know about the triangle, the square, the circle, the rectangle. Some new ones we've been learning about are the pentagon, the hexagon, and the trapezoid. We've been learning about their attributes, the vertices, the angles, what we notice that is the same about them every time. We've been talking about how to measure the distance around these shapes. These shapes I can draw on this whiteboard behind me, and I don't need to add anything to the whiteboard. So let me see if I can show you what that means. All I have to do is pick up a marker and write on this white surface. I can just draw these shapes. Okay, there's a name or a category for shapes that you can just draw on any surface, right? You've seen your teacher draw on a table. You could grab a pencil and draw on your paper. I can use a marker and draw on this. When I draw a shape on this board, I am not adding anything to the board. It's not something I can't pick it up and hold it. It is just on the same surface as the board, okay? I can do that with any of these shapes. Triangle, square, circle, rectangle, trapezoid. Miss Reed needs to make that better. There we go. Pentagon. And the last one, hexagon. Okay? Now these shapes we can measure, and we've been talking about measuring words and what it would look like if we were measuring them. If I were to use my ruler to measure these shapes that are written on this whiteboard, I could measure two different things with them. I could measure their length, and I could measure their width. These are the two things that I could measure with these shapes. Length means how long something is. Width means how wide something is. So let's just take a peek with a ruler and try and measure one of these shapes, the length of one of these shapes. Okay, I'm just going to use the trapezoid for fun. I'm going to put them in blue so you know which one I'm measuring. Okay, if I want to measure his length, I'm going to measure how tall he is, his up and down. Length is his up and down. It kind of makes me think of the word vertical. Okay, so I would be measuring this side and this side to tell me how tall he is, his length. Okay, if I wanted to measure his width, I'd be measuring how wide he is. Okay, I might be measuring like this. Width, width. Okay, can I measure any other way with these shapes that are on this board? No, I can't. There's only two ways to measure. I can only measure length and width. Any shape that you can put on a flat surface with a marker, pencil, piece of chalk, pen, anything like that, that goes onto a surface and it is just flat on the surface. If you run your hand over it, you don't feel any bumps or anything. That means it is a 2D shape. 2D stands for two-dimensional. Two-dimensional means it only has two dimensions that we can measure. We can measure the length and the width. 1, 2. That's it. There's no other way to measure them. There's another category of shapes that are called three-dimensional. When you talk about three-dimensional shapes, you can measure three different dimensions with them. You can still measure length, you can still measure width, but now you can also measure, Miss Reed needs to spell that right, height. Okay? When you can measure height, then you're talking about measuring something that pops up off the surface. Here's an example. This is a 3D shape. I cannot just place it on my whiteboard. I can't even draw it on my whiteboard because it has too many dimensions. It has, if I put it up here, it's going to pop out from the surface of my whiteboard. See how it pops out? There's room under here. I have to put my hand under there to make it sit up there. If I let go, it would just fall because it's not a part of this surface. It's got its own dimension that takes it out away from that surface. That dimension is its height, okay? So we have length, width, and height that we can measure with 3D shapes. That's what makes a 3D shape different than a 2D shape. Let's compare two shapes that are similar. The difference is that one of them is 2D, one of them is 3D. Let's look at this triangle. And this cone. Okay? This triangle will have a length that we could measure right here. Let's grab our ruler. We could measure the length of the triangle here. We could measure the length of the cone here. They'd even be kind of similar, right? You could measure their width here. You could measure the width of this cone here. But there's a new dimension that we can measure with the cone that we don't even have, that doesn't exist with that 2D shape. And that's this measurement right here. I'm going to turn this so you can see it. See how this space right here, if I turn the cone back and stick it on the board, you can see that it pops out a certain distance from the board. And we could measure that distance that it pops out. This one does not pop out. It is flat, right against the surface. So this distance that it pops out, that I can show you on the bottom of my shape, is called the height. Okay?